Understanding is a different experience. I feel like in a lot of ways that allows me to open my heart more, especially when it comes to fear. That's exactly what I want this to be about. I want this whole video to be about fear and the importance of fear. And I wrote this down right behind me. At the top of it, it says surrender. And then it says right under it, the fear is real. So is your potential. Loss, death, heartbreak. Yep. Those are certainties. So if you're watching this, then I think you've experienced a level of those three. Well, I could speak for myself. I've experienced all of those three. And I think as of recently, my grandmother, she passed away, God rest her soul, lived to 89 years old. And she lived what it is to stand by her uniqueness. Most people don't have that kind of courage. Yet she's my grandmother. She built a legacy. I'm her grandson. And I understand a truth of reality is your ancestors are cheering you on behind you. They're so proud of you. Especially for your choices of courage that serve you. And I mean, to think about how proud you would be of your descendants when you recognize the courage that flows through their veins is a higher level of consciousness towards a life that can be attained, the potential that is real. So I'll speak for myself. There's been a lot of big changes in my life, especially after I came back on my trip after visiting my grandma. I recognized that I have to embody the change. I have to embody the change. And that's not easy, because in a lot of ways, when it comes to confronting a fear, what you're really doing is you're diving into the fear, meaning you're getting closer to it. But you're not just jumping into the fear. You're jumping into the fear with the highest embodiment of yourself. So you're immersing yourself into a fear as the person you want to become. That's faith. And I know that's helped me. It's helped me tremendously. It's helped me tremendously because when I experienced loss, and I had to just take a moment of not actually recording anything for a long time because, it's very easy to kind of fall into the trap of, oh, this will go good or this will do well. And I honestly think that I have removed myself so far from that it's done me well. Fear is good. You should experience fear. Despite what you're being taught, what you're being told, the level of bypassing that removes you from the potential of your life. To say that you wouldn't be afraid when you met the woman of your dreams, to say that you wouldn't be afraid when you met the partner that you want to share a life with, to say that you wouldn't be afraid if you saw your potential, I think everything is being removed from people, which is fear serves a function. It is there to get you closer with what you value. It is there to bring you to the strength of your love. Every individual has the strength, but you need to start thinking about, what does that mean for me? What exactly am I afraid of? And what exactly do I need to face? Now, you might find this very interesting. You might not have the ability to face fear because you've consistently trained yourself to avoid it, which is, I put survival above truth. Now, truth is very interesting because in a lot of ways, it requires you to be dissatisfied with the current experience of your life, and perhaps maybe you don't like it, and there's a deep sadness that surrounds it. That's a good experience because that'll bring you closer to where you need to go in your life. And I'll speak for myself. I noticed that if I really want to be moving into my future as a 26-year-old man at this point in my life, I just had my birthday recently. In fact, actually, my grandmother passed a few days before my birthday. 2 days exactly. And to think that that's the furthest thing from a coincidence. I believe that's the beginning of a higher calling. And it was a higher calling for me because I recognize that there's so much I'm afraid of. There's a connection that I yearn for, I long for. And in a lot of ways, how can I get down to the beliefs about me that I need to face? And it's like, well, maybe I need to go for myself. And I think that's at the core of all fears. What you're really addressing is something unknown. And for me, what I'm addressing is something unknown. And it made it very, very clear to me that your life has meaning. And I think you could recognize that when the people you love leave an empty room. And then we start thinking about the empty room that we leave when we pass on. And then what do we really pay attention to? If we keep avoiding that, as scary as it may be, maybe you could look at it for a little. I noticed that when I looked at it, I was able to experience a tremendous wisdom, which is that death is at the core of wisdom. Death is at the core of life. Death is at the core of an experience. And I believe the experiences that transform us, death is at its core. Now, that might sound a little dark, but I think this is exactly the point. And what I wanted to get you guys closer to is that you do not have to reject it. You can experience it. That the purpose of fear is to bring you closer to the strength of your love. And fear does very poorly when you deal with it unconsciously because it manifests itself in an anxiety across all areas of your life. And so at the core of it, what I'm really talking about today is courage. How do you embody that? What does that really look like? So I used to be very proficient, and I guess you could say a lot of the standard coaching. That's actually what I used to do. I used to stand up and do lectures just like this. I'd have a bunch of people on the other side of a camera, and I'd convince them that I'm something I'm not, and it would work. That's the worst part, it worked. And by the way, well, then you might go, worked, define it, play it out long enough. Doesn't work, because at the end of the day, you have to avoid anybody who's saying the truth. And you actually, in a lot of ways, have to conform to people that reinforce that way of thinking for yourself. Truth is scary. Yeah, because it requires a sacrifice. Your potential is scary because it's a confirmation that there will be constant sacrifices in relationship to that covenant. Now, to remove somebody's ability to experience fear would remove them from the natural process of experiencing the strength of their love. And then when you experience the strength of your love, you develop courage. And so in a lot of ways, what I'm recognizing in my life is if I want to step into this part of my life, I have to create room. And you want to create the space for what you want to walk into your life. On top of creating the space, you have to embody the change. And then there's no guarantee. And I find that to be even more miraculous, that there is no guarantee of your actions. Now, find a reason. If your vulnerability wouldn't get the guy that you love or the girl that you want, if potentially your actions towards the best version of yourself and all of your efforts fall thin, they fall short, then what's it worth? In these moments of me talking about this, I begin to recognize there's a certain, because I mean, it's tough. I want to go back to the comfortable home I grew up in. Because in a lot of ways, I'm going to be taking this out. This whole studio has been in my parents' house for years. I'm going to go for myself. But then when you go for yourself, remember, you could aim down, and this is comfortable. You don't have to feel afraid when your head is down. When your head is up, you're looking at the possibility of your life. And also you're looking at who you will become. Maybe that's really far removed from who you are. I feel that way. When I see that, I'm like, that's possible? And then the more I look at it, the more fear I experience. And the more fear I experience, the more it burns off all the chains on my heart that stop me from pursuing that. Because, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe what I'm looking at is nothing more than a fantasy. Why would I go deep enough within me to do the right thing? Or what goodness does it serve if, I'm willing to step into an unknown? What's the guarantee of that? Who's to say that this isn't any better? Okay, there it goes. It sounds a little neurotic when I talk about it, but at the same time, I'm actually questioning it. And there's a power to experiencing this fear because I'm getting clear with myself. And I want to do that. I want to share that. And he's like, well, you really want to get clear with yourself because I know for certain that in the process of me experiencing fear, because that's nothing, I've been experiencing nothing less ever since my grandmother passed. Well, because loss is a reminder of one of the biggest reasons to be afraid. Maybe there's a lack of control in your life, right? I'll lose my parents one day. They're getting older. Something to be afraid of. Here's another one. I love my nephew. I love my nieces. I love my brothers. Yeah, what if I need to go for myself, my own life, to really satisfy my deepest yearning? I'm really afraid of letting that go because in a lot of ways, if I just keep those attachments, then we can just cling on to each other into the void of existence that we believe deep down serves no purpose, has no meaning. Look, children do this with parents. Parents do it with children. Partners do it with one another. Siblings do it with one another. And the last thing I would want, because at the basis of all attachment, is that there's fear. And you might go, well, why? And that makes sense. Connection and attachment are very different. And there is a big difference because you have to look at what's at its core. Is it love? And well, love is the ability to let somebody go. Well, because love, if you take it deep enough, is a covenant with your potential. And it's the ability to recognize that that serves your best interest. And you take steps in that direction. And if you're not willing to take steps in that direction, then maybe the bond you have is two people clinging on to one another in avoidance of each other's lives as they continue to drag each other's claws even deeper into one another. And you might even say, well, there's some glorified attachments too. But at the end of the day, you start recognizing that it comes at the cost of both people, then this is not a loving relationship. And I know I speak a lot about relationships, but I think that this is at the core of what allows somebody to expand their life. What allowed me to do this when I first started is I knew that there was a possibility for me to be more. It became inevitable. And as of recently, when I'm genuinely praying for a partner that strengthens me to that path, that I'm deeply connected to, I mean, it starts with you. I also started recognizing that there are attachments in my life. I hold on to those things. I could sit down in this chair and have a million webinars and never really feel the effects of what I do. I could stand in a room of just 10 people and I could feel the impact of it. When I started this, that's what I did. I worked with people in person. I want to start having events. That terrifies me. I want to take this for myself and I want to take it internationally. And that terrifies me too. I'll lose control. What will happen to me? I get my own place. Maybe I can't cover the rent because I'm going to get something nice. Who's to say that will sustain itself? And let's take it with my heart. Why should I do this? Why should I open my heart? Why should I experience my emotions? I'm terrified of them. They're overwhelmingly deep. The feelings of loss I feel like will drown me. The feelings of sadness, I feel that it's a tidal wave coming near me. At what point will it end? Will it just remove everything I could offer others? I have these beliefs, and at the core of these beliefs is it's not fair. It's not fair. And believe me, if I wasn't afraid, I would have never been able to address something as poisonous as that. Why go for myself? Why build a life like that? Why aspire towards a loving relationship? Because I promise you, that comes above everything. And whatever kind of guy wants to tell you that that's not number one is completely void of the fact that a really powerful, intimate relationships mirrors an eternal covenant between man and God. And I promise you, if that's not number one, you got your priorities off. So go for yourself. What God tells Abraham. He tells that to Abraham and he shows him his potential. He looks upward, right? What happens when you look upwards? What do you see? You see the stars. A mirror of your potential. And let's make a covenant about that potential. Let's make it an intimate covenant. Let's embody that in a circumcision. And that this will be the core of your action. And there's an adventure. There's such an adventure. And oh my God, how we crave an adventure. And it's something interesting for me because I'm sure a lot of the men will relate to this. It's that there's this kind of, I'll wait for somebody to come into my life. And watch out for that word, wait. It's a dangerous word. It's not patience. Waiting has implications. Waiting is also fundamentally false because there's no such thing as waiting. Your mind creates the concept of waiting. You're never waiting. You're constantly moving. It's a question of where. And then it became clear to me, which is, okay, what I'm afraid of in a lot of ways is where I need to go. Now the question is where do I look when I take those steps? What do I embody when I immerse myself into the fear? Letting go of someone, letting go of a place, letting go of an identity. Letting go of your father's home. I mean, you're letting it go. There's no chance it'll come back. In fact, actually, any forward movement requires you to let all of that go. Well, this made me understand the component of sacrifice, which is, there's an inevitability of death coming for all of us. It's a beautiful conversation. It's a question of what does our life mean? What did your life stand for? I think that's somebody who's connected to what's most valuable in life. The biblical story of Abraham is one that he's finally able to go for himself, and he's blessed with everything, and even a son that will be promised a great nation from the woman he loves, and the miracles of miracles that are performed. And to think about that being what consciousness really opens you up to, the constant miracle of life. You're not separate from that. I would say you're separate from it if you don't feel. And a person who doesn't feel doesn't get to experience the freedom of their life. And we're going to get to that later. And so I think the greatest sacrifice of his life was the sacrifice he needed to make for his son. And it's mirrored in the New Testament in relationship to Jesus, God being the Father and Jesus being the Son, that these things are representative of a much higher covenant, which is why exactly did he die for his sins? Or did he die for our sins? Well, what does that even mean? And it's like, well, maybe he died for a purpose. What was that purpose? So that everyone can know God. God is true. God is real. And that's something worth dying for. But then again, you start recognizing, well, then that means that every single little moment of your life had eternal meaning to it. To take that away from everyone else would just cause them to go back into the unconscious spiral that they remained in when you found them. Very much similar to a slave, like a disembodied consciousness constantly running. And it takes strength to be a person who could develop themselves to a point where they can address fear. Because to address fear requires a tremendous amount of courage. And at the end of fear, and actually more than what really is the source of courage, is heart. And there's this heart. The heart seems to understand faith. And so, interestingly enough, you think that where do you find faith, right? You're on the cliff, you're ready to make a leap, and you see nothing but the floor and a series of sharp rocks and potentially an inevitable death when you jump. We're looking for something before we make that jump. There's something you look up at as you do, and that's the highest intention. That's the highest function. That's a step towards the highest function. Now it's fully thought out. It has to be. And because fear works that way, it gets you to do exactly that. Look at the groundwork. Look at yourself. Look at the possibilities. Look at the beliefs that you have about your journey. And also, by the way, not just about your journey, the beliefs you have about life. And then if you can go deep enough, you could find something eternal. And that's the choice to do what's right in service of what's truly good. And then you find something precious at its core. You find strength, real strength. This isn't the strength that makes people run into something to be somebody they're not. Because I used to do that all the time, you know? Well, I was more terrified of remaining the same. Still fear nonetheless. But what about the conscious effort to recognize that what I need and what really fulfills me is on that path? And there might not be a guarantee. I might not meet the woman. This might not work out. But I know that's for me. I know that's for me. I know that fulfills me. I know that sets me free. And there's something really powerful about being able to aim yourself upwards. And I notice that an upward aim, it feels impossible when you see the capacity of your life and the potential of it. And it almost feels like, in a lot of ways, like, am I really just making this up? But simultaneously, as you look up at it, it burns the shackles off of your heart and your capacity to give, your capacity to love, and that sets you free. And so I noticed, what exactly makes a free man? Well, he's the person that could find the part of himself that allows him to take the leap before he fully understands, because the understanding or the faith is found on the fall, and then your wings emerge before you hit the bottom. It might not be the thing you wanted to hear, but that's exactly what faith takes. It takes an embodiment of the change into what you fear most. So you might say, well, when does a person become a king? Well, when he's willing to wield the sword and aim it towards, well, that's a whole different metaphor. Yeah, it's when they're willing to go up against the dragon. You might not be the best, but you might be stepping into shoes. And now that's interesting, right? How is it you know that you're stepping into shoes, or maybe just into your death? That's the faith. There's a certain point where even in the walk on the way up to it, you're given a choice to believe that to be true. Is it true? Are you a king? Can you aspire towards more? Or are the stories of your past just remain to be true? And a lot of my work is psychology and helping people understand the nature of themselves, and potentially that could set them free. But it all comes down to a choice. Fear being what strengthens us with the choice that we're willing to stand by, even in our defeat. Because you can really connect to what's meaningful and to who you are. And in a single step, you could step into the best version of yourself. It's aimed upwards, and it's revolutionary by nature. It's challenging of everything that your life once stood for. It's the beginning of taking a gamble. It's Jack and the Beanstalk. Recognizing that, another day of a roof over my head might not be worth it. Maybe there's potential that I could reach great heights if I'd be willing to take a risk. And now you might notice something interesting about this, that the things that you fear are of great meaning. And if you fear them, they're typically real. And because you fear them, you will succeed. This whole idea that if you don't feel fear, you're in the pocket is removed. Talk to athletes. If their nerves aren't there, there's something off. It's important. If I don't feel terrified for these steps forward in my life, for who I'm going to be and how that's going to transform me, I'm going to walk through the fires of truth. I'm going to step right into the unknown. I might not even feel the same way. I might not even be the same man. I might not even be interested in this the same way that I thought I was. I could tell you for certain that what I know has run its course. Whole video on fear? No. Whole video on faith. Faith that fear brings you closer to who you are. You can have faith in that.